Hey all, welcome to Parker's Reef. On today's episode, we're going to check out the highly anticipated smart tester from Reef Factory. Alright guys, thank you for joining me on another episode of Parker's Reef. I'm here standing in front of the Dream Reef Tank, bringing to you a review on a product that I have waited a couple of years to review, the highly anticipated smart tester from Reef Factory. Now, the folks over at Reef Factory in Poland did not want to let this out of their door until they were 100% happy with it. And my job today is to put this device through its paces and see whether they should be 100% happy with it and whether it will suit you and your reef tank requirements. Now, I will just point out that Reef Factory did send me this device for the review. There's been no payment or anything like that at all, so you can trust. And in fact, I will go over at the end of the video my 3 pros and 3 cons, just so you can make a good, educated decision whether this device is going to suit you and your reef tank, or of course, if it doesn't. Alright, so starting off with what exactly is the smart tester from Reef Factory, and the name does kind of give it away. It's a device that will take a test kit that you normally do manually and do that automatically for you. In this instance, the device ships with a phosphate reagent and basically removes the need for you to have to do manual phosphate test kits, whether you're using Reef Factory, Red Sea, Hanna, Salifit, whatever the test kit you're currently using. You can put that aside because the smart tester is going to do that phosphate test for you. Now, it will also be able to do in the near future some other parameters, and it is listed here on the box to say that it will in the short-term future be able to test magnesium, calcium, phosphate like it currently does, and of course nitrate, which will pair very nicely with their KH Keeper that they currently have on the market that automatically tests alkalinity for you. Now that very conveniently leads on to what this device is not. Now whilst it can test all 4 of those parameters, it's not designed to do all 4 of those parameters set up on your tank at any one given point in time. The process to load a reagent into it and then also to take that reagent out, flush the lines, put a new reagent in and calibrate it is not a very quick process, and it's not designed to be something you're going to be doing to test 4 parameters on your tank on any sort of weekend. This device is designed to set up with that one parameter and then test that for weeks or months until you then change focus. You might go from focusing on phosphate because you've got a bit of a phosphate issue. Then all of a sudden your magnesium might become an issue and you want to really automate the test for that. It is entirely possible to take the reagents out, load in magnesium, and then set up your schedule to really focus in on those magnesium tests and results moving forward. But it's definitely not designed to do 2, 3, or 4 of those parameters on your tank at any one given time. Alright, now that we've got what it is, what it does, and what it does not out of the way, I think we should get into unboxing this bad boy and then of course setting it up on my Dream Reef Tank and putting it through its paces. Alright, so here we have the smart tester from Reef Factory. Now this guy, I believe, comes with the phosphate reagent, but we're going to unbox it right now and find out. So let me swing open this very nice looking box. I should say that it's got some mentions on here that it's Wi-Fi connected. We've got App Store and Google Play apps for it. Of course, if you're not familiar with the Reef Factory ecosystem, their software is probably industry leading in the world of aquarium products. You can see a little sneak peek of the sort of insides of it here. You've got a couple of big dosing pumps and then some smaller dosing pumps, spots for your reagents, and maybe just like a little vial for the test to take place. And that's really all there is to it. I don't want to oversimplify it though, I'm sure it's a little bit more complicated than that, but let's open this box up and have a look. Start off with some instructions here. Let's see, this sort of goes through the mounting and the, yeah, we can mount it. We've got to get the water inlet with a filter, put that in your sump, connect up your inlets and outlets, take the front off and load up a little pill into the stirring chamber, give it some power and then connect to the app. Makes sense. We've got some instructions here regarding the reagents. It looks to be mostly around, I was going to say mostly around safety and things like that, but it is also how to prepare your reagents. Looks like they screw off and you put them in this little tray, hook up your hoses here, and then you are off and running. So we'll get to that soon enough. And then what's this last little bit of instructions here? Yeah, it looks like some fine print. We won't worry about that. All right, first cab off the rank here. This looks to be the unit that holds the filter in your sump. Has some screws that goes together, and your little filter will sit in this section here, and then you're off and running. This will allow you to mount that to your sump. I've actually already got a pretty good spot for automated testers because I go through so many of them on my tank in testing videos like this one. So I've probably got a pretty good spot for the inlet. Looks like we've got some tubes here for I'm going to assume they're for the reagents. We're going to sit those, actually might swap things. I'm going to put products there, loosely described as rubbish over there. We get some digital scales. Now I'm going to assume these are for some sort of calibration. It's much easier to measure precise amounts of liquid with a weight than it is via a little cylinder to look at if you can line up the lines. So that's always a good touch. This one's interesting, RO water. I'm not 100% sure what that's for. I don't believe this test uses RO water, but we've got a little vial there. Interesting. Yes, here's the reset magnet. We've also got the little spin magnetic bar and the screws for our magnet clip. There's also a little 3D printed tool here. I'm not 100% certain what that's for, but it does appear to be 3D printed, so maybe a little last minute adjustment, or addition I should say. And then we've got some different colored hoses here. Looks like we've got a blue hose. They've got these quick connect, these twist fittings like the Kamoa X1 Pro T2 uses. Absolutely love those connections. Same as the Reef Factory automatic elk tester. And we've got some more here. So there's a green one, there's another green one, and then there is the long clear one with your filter on the end, which makes sense. Then we have a power supply with numerous different fittings. We're not going to need that one, not going to need that one. We are going to need that one. And here's our very small little power supply. There's not much to this unit. Let's see what sort of power it draws. 12 volts, 1 amp, fairly standard. Pretty simple little twist click, and he's ready to go. These other ones can go on the rubbish side. And then the magic, where all the magic happens. Get that rubbish out of there. Here we go. Whew. All right, this is a pretty slick looking little unit. Get that box out of the way. How about that? It's got a little magnetic front. Very nice, little magnets encased in there. Here's our reagents. We've got PO41, PO42, so our phosphate test uses 2 reagents. The machine itself actually has the ability to do up to 3 reagents because we've got 3 of the little pumps here and the ability to put, well, it looks like it says 4 slots there, but I'm assuming maybe the fourth one, I'm not sure the fourth one is, but at least 3 slots there, which depending on whether the future tests that this kit is going to use around calcium, magnesium and nitrate, perhaps one of those uses an additional reagent. But in this instance, I'm going to be using pump A and pump B, and you can see here we've got 2 of our main dosing pumps here. These look very familiar to the other Reef Factory dosing pumps, and these guys are bringing the water into this vial here and out of the vial here. And in fact, I believe we can, it's got a little tab we can pull here. Here is the actual cylinder itself. So you can see where the water gets pumped into the top, it gets pumped out at the bottom. So when it needs to empty it, of course, we'll put that little magnetic stir bar, which is in here in this vial. And then there's going to be some sensors on the side in there that basically look for the color change. And you can see, well, I think you can see there, the pumps from the reagents have got these fine little nozzles, almost like nitrous foggers for those motorsport freaks out there, that are going to just very precisely put those reagents into this chamber. Of course, it's going to stir then, and it's going to use those sensors there for a color change. So I have to say the majority of these auto testers work in a very similar sort of fashion. They're all basically replicating the manual tests that you and I do at home. And that's probably the best way to go. It's always good when you're replicating something that you do, because then you know when things are working the way they should. You know how the test works. You know when things don't look right. It just always makes sense to me when we're automating a process that we manually do, rather than coming up with a completely different process. So that looks pretty good. I mean, there's not much more to it. It's a bit of heft. There is this pretty nifty looking little mount on the back here. I don't know if this is a DIN rail, as they call them, or if it's their own little sort of bracket system, but you get all of these different slots where you can screw that into your wall, and then this unit will clip to it, so you can just slide that up there and the unit will clip there, or I assume you can just sit it upright like that. I don't believe you can sit it backwards that way. I believe it has to be upright because we've got that vial in there that's going to obviously have liquid in it. So it needs to remain flat and upright. Looks like a little status light up here as well. Nice little slot on the back here to put the power lead in so that it does sit flush on these nice little rubber absorbers. But I think we're probably at the point where I need to get these lines, double check my instructions here, run these lines of the filters. You'll see these are the ones that just screw nicely in. So this is in, he just twist locks on there, makes it super easy. You don't have to try and pull these hoses off. You can just twist, comes off, twist it back on. Get my water in, my water out, do my calibrations, connect up to the app obviously, and see how we go. So let's jump into it. Alright, once you've got the unit out of the box and you've figured out where you're going to mount it, either using the bracket or just sitting on a nice flat surface, you can go on ahead and put your water inline in that nice little bracket and ensure it's in adequate flow. From there you need to pop the front cover off the unit, put the magnetic pill in, connect up your wastewater line, and you're right to hook up the power and go through the software process. Now, you need to jump into your Reef Factory software like I have here and go add device. If you haven't done that before, it guides you through the process, but I'll take you through what I had to do on my system here. The new system here, you scroll through and pick the type of device you're adding. So I'm going through and then I'm going to come across, let's have a look, parameter measurement, smart test is there, click next. Now it's going to ask if I can allow it to look for devices on my network and then to use the camera. So once I hit the scan button, I'll actually look for the barcode on the back of the device and you can see me live fumbling with it here. As soon as it picks up that QR code, it knows the serial number and then we'll ask if it can connect to that Wi-Fi network, which it's doing right now. Now from that point, you're going to have to put in your own Wi-Fi details, specifically your 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi details. Now, I'm actually going to blank that out a little bit on screen just because I don't really need to see you guys see me entering my password. But once you've done that, the device will connect to your Wi-Fi network. I got a little message saying it cannot connect to home Wi-Fi here, although then I got this pop-up notification saying the device is connected successfully. So I don't know, a little bit of a glitch there, but thankfully it did all work. Now it is asking me to select an aquarium to add this device to. I've got 2 tanks here running at Reef Factory gear. So I'm going to connect this one up to my Dream Reef, and I'm going to say that the place of purchase was Deer Park Aquarium. You can see the list of Australian wholesalers here, or Australian retailers, I should say, that you can pick from. They're all alphabetically sorted, of course, which just, to be honest, I'm not actually sure what Reef Factory used that information for, but maybe it's handy for any sort of warranty claim or anything like that. Anyway, with Deer Park Aquarium selected, I'm now going to press OK, and the device is now connected, and it will show up in my Dream Reef tank there, which you can see Smart Tester. Now, once I've done that and I go to the device itself, it connects to it, it's going to say, haha, this is brand new, we need to do a calibration, which is a very good point. Now, you can see we've got a number of steps here. This is step 1 of 7. Which is using that little container we found in the unboxing labeled RO water, which you can use either salt or RO water for. You just need to instruct that in the app here, and then follow the written instructions here, which show you which hoses to connect to or from that little container. You can see here on screen, I'm currently doing the reagent lines there. I'm just following the instructions. There's these hoses here as well, which you can circumvent the water in and out from the unit to connect into that little container. And then at various points, the app will tell you to take the tubes out of that container and then put it on the scales and insert the volume or the weight of that container into the app so it knows just exactly how much water it is moving back and forth. Now, once you've done that, your device is set up, it's plumbed in, it's configured, it's calibrated, it's ready to go. You will be asked to set a schedule like I am here. Now, this is one point where I did get a little disappointed because I was hoping I could pick days and times from there, but it seems like I can only really pick between a set time or times each day or an interval in between each test, but nonetheless it still works just fine. So you can see here I'm currently deleting the 12 o'clock test and I just have a 5 p.m. test each day. Now that we've got a schedule set, the device is asking me to do the initial test on a manual measurement just to get the ball rolling, and you can see on screen here it's showing me that it's 10% of the way into the measurement in progress. Your device is now set up and scheduled, ready to give you automated phosphate tests. All right, now that we've got this bad boy unboxed and set up on my Dream Reef tank, I want to pop the hood and watch it do a test to see if I can work out how it works, because being a tinkerer, that's just what I like to do. And please bear in mind when I go through the process here, this is just my interpretation from watching the time lapse of a test. It's not official word from Reef Factory as to how the unit works, but let's go with a fairly educated guess. Let's check it out.
All right, first things first, we're going to run this water out pump just to make sure our chamber is completely empty. Next thing we're going to do is turn on the water in pump just to put some nice new tank water in there, basically give it a rinse and a flush. And as you can see, the water out pump's going to pump that out very quickly again. Next up, we're going to put a precise amount of water into the chamber in preparation for testing. And then if we have a look at inside the reagent bottles themselves, you'll actually see a magnetic stir bar. So the next step is actually to stir that, which replicates shaking the reagents. Now you can see the little reagent pumps just putting drop after drop into the chamber, which is obviously doing its color test, before having that water pumped back out again and followed up by some water coming in just to rinse that chamber. In fact, I think we do another rinse, we pump that out, we pump some new water in, which tells me that we actually do two separate tests using the two different reagents, which obviously gives a comparison value. So we give this chamber a nice rinse, as you can see here, followed up by a nice amount of tank water coming into the chamber. We then follow that up with another reagent drop in there, which is going to give us our value. Once that sensor sees the color change that it's looking for, it's then going to pump that water out. You see those little red LEDs going on there. The water then gets pumped out, some new water gets pumped in, we flush that all through the system. From those two different reagents and those two different measurements, the device is then able to determine our phosphate, which is super interesting because it does vary a little from our manual tests.
All right, now that we've seen how, or at least how I think, the Reef Factory Smart Tester works, the burning questions are, is it accurate? And of course, is it repeatable? Now, here on my Dream Reef tank, I've got three different forms of measuring phosphate. One is the Reef Factory manual phosphate test kit, and thankfully, as you would assume, it very much replicates what this shows, except it has much more resolution, because if you're anything like me and wear glasses this thick, trying to read a color chart is sometimes up to the interpretation. But when you see the number that the digital device gives you, it makes seeing the color on this stand out much more, and the two align very nicely. Now, next up is my Martini photometer, which is very similar to a Hanna checker that a lot of people use out there. Now, I will openly and honestly say that this device does give me a little bit of a swing. If I do 3 tests in a row, I'll have to add those up and then divide them by 3 to get the sort of a feel for where the phosphate is. So I don't always trust its results all that much, but I can say that the average of the 3 results I got from this at every time I checked against the Reef Factory Smart Tester very much aligned with what I was seeing, especially after things like a GFO change, so I could drop that phosphate level down from where I normally run it. The two of them aligned very nicely and gave very repeatable and accurate results. Now, next up, and probably most controversially, is my Spin Touch. Now, I say controversially because a lot of people think this device is not accurate because it doesn't have the resolution of some other test kits out there. The 1 decimal place in phosphate that this unit reads in does put a few people off, but to be honest, it doesn't bother me. If my phosphate reads on this as 0.0, 0.1 or 0.2, I leave it alone. As soon as it shows me 0.3, I change my GFO and try to get it back to 0.0 or 0.1 again, and it's worked perfectly for me over the years so far. I'm super happy to say that the Reef Factory Smart Tester aligned with this perfectly, except it did give me that extra decimal place and of course the ability to schedule tests. Now, I guess that does cover off that this device is accurate and repeatable, at least in my opinion. In fact, I was super impressed with the accuracy of it. It gave me some insights into how much phosphate did things like feeding my tank add, and also when I do a water change or when I turn up or down my automated water change, whether that makes an impact on the phosphates or not. And of course, things like when the fuge has been running for a little while, just how much phosphate that's sucking out of the water. Being able to see your phosphate levels go up and down depending on the time of day, what sort of nutrient export is running, and of course what sort of food you're putting into the tank was super insightful. And that's exactly the sort of benefit that I want to see from an automated smart tester like the one from Reef Factory. All right, so I guess with all of that knowledge at hand, the question comes down to whether I recommend it for your reef aquarium or not. Now, ultimately, you are the only one that can answer that question for yourself, but I will give you my 3 cons and then we'll finish up with my 3 pros to help you decide whether this device is suitable for you or not. Starting off on the cons, because I always like to end on a high. All right, starting off with our cons, and the first one I feel a little bit unfair on saying because I don't actually know the price locally in Australia or in America yet, but I did see online the device is selling for approximately 680 euros at a retail price, which loosely translates to 740 US dollars or thereabouts, and again, around 1150, 1200 Australian dollars. Now, whether that's where the price actually ends up in your local market, I cannot say because this device is obviously made in Europe, and then shipping it to other parts of the world adds more cost to it. but it gives you a ballpark idea where it's at. Now, personally, I actually think that's quite a reasonable price, but I know people out there are gonna want this thing to be like $300, $400, $500 because they would like to buy 4 of them and have it do all 4 of the parameters at once. And if you go down that path, it is gonna be a fairly expensive proposition. And that does lead me on to con number 2, which is, of course, whilst this device can do 4 different parameters, it's really only designed to do 1 of those at a time and have monthly, if not quarterly, changes from one reagent to a different reagent if your needs change and you want to focus on a different parameter. I know early on a lot of people were thinking this device was going to be able to do all 4. As it sits out of the box, just plug it into your aquarium and off you go. And sadly, it's not capable of doing that without a little bit of manual intervention. And last but not least on my list of cons is the scheduling option. Now this is one that hopefully the team at Reef Factory can address and update with their software in the future. But at the moment you can only set a time per day, well at least that's all I could find with the software I had on hand to do a test. Things like phosphate, but also other parameters like calcium and magnesium, and potentially also nitrate. I might want to schedule the test to go, say, at 6 a.m. on Friday and then 3 p.m. on Sunday, rather than scheduling a set time each day or an interval of time between tests. I just think I'd like a little bit more flexibility with my testing there, so that rounds out my 3 cons. All right, onto a happier note, and that's my 3 pros. The first one I want to start off with, and it's something that did surprise me straight out of the box, was just how small this device is and how well it is built. It feels like a very high quality bit of gear. The dosing pumps on it look to be very, very high quality, and it runs very, very quiet, if not silently. So I've been super, super impressed with the build quality, and I think that will reflect in its pricing a little bit to show that it's a solid bit of gear that should last you quite a bit of time. Now next up on my list of pros is the number of tests you actually get out of a set of reagents. Now granted, I've only got the phosphate test with me here, but I was super impressed to say that despite them being fairly small vials of reagent, you actually get 160 tests out of that reagent, which is quite a lot. I mean, you can schedule that to run for half a year on one set of reagents, doing a test every single day, which personally I think is super, super impressive. Now I will touch on that I did see the magnesium test out there, does 50 tests, so it does step down a fair way, but again, magnesium's not something I would anticipate you would test every day, probably more likely a once per week. So if you're doing 50 tests on a set of reagents, you're gonna get nearly a year out of those reagents, which is equally as impressive in my opinion. As for the other tests with the calcium and the nitrate, I don't know how many tests you're going to get out of those reagents until that information comes out, but hopefully it's around the same sort of number. Now last but not least, and kind of is the entire purpose of this device, is its accuracy. I had medium expectations for this device. I'm always skeptical when a new automated tester comes out because people expect it to be very, very accurate, when normally I will tell people that automation devices like this are to give you a feel and you shouldn't react too much on the numbers they give you. In my somewhat limited experience now of only a couple of weeks, and I do have this device to keep, so I can give it a review in a number of months' time if you like, and cover any details around the software and actions and all sorts of other things you can do in the Reef Factory app. But I can say in 2 weeks, in putting this device through a bit of a torture test, for lack of other words, in that letting my phosphates come up a little bit, feeding a bit extra to see whether the phosphate would go up, feeding a bit less to see if the phosphate would go down, tweaking my refugium schedule to see if I could get that to absorb more phosphate, turning my automated water change up and down, and this device accurately represented those changes in the tank very, very well, and the results were super repeatable. As soon as I finished a test, I could schedule another test, like a manual press in the thing in the app to say, do another test right now, and it gave me exactly the same result, and we're talking 20-30 minutes apart, which is super, super important. And I think if you have that much confidence in the device, it does open the door a little bit more to letting the device run a bit more of your aquarium, which ultimately is where everyone wants reef tank automation to go. Personally, I still use them as monitors to help guide me in doing my manual tasks, but we are, with this device, getting closer to the future where we can actually get a little bit more hands off. Now, obviously other people's results may vary, and of course my results may vary over the coming weeks, but after these first 2 weeks, I've been blown away with the accuracy of this device. And like I said, the insights it gave me from changing things like water changes, refugium lights, feeding more, feeding less, changing brands of food even, or going from frozen to pellets, how that affected my phosphate was really, really next level stuff. And for all of the data junkies out there, a bit like myself, you're gonna absolutely love it. All right, I guess we should wrap things up there. Like I touched on a few times in this video, I can't tell you if this device suits you and your reef tank. All I can do is tell you how it works and what I think are some of the strengths and weaknesses of it and leave it up to you. I can say though that after a little bit of skepticism, like I always have with brand new automation testers out there, I have been blown away with how impressive this smart test is, and I cannot wait for the new reagents to come out so I can try it with some different parameters and see what kind of insights I get from changing things around my calcium reactor, or when maybe some of the media starts to deplete and how that impacts values, or whether just the uptake on my corals changes from day to night. I love data like that, and if you're a bit like me, I think you're going to have an absolute ball with this device. It isn't the most easy thing to set up, but the app is very well guided, and it does take a little while, but it guides you through the process and gives you a very robust solution with what I can deem very accurate and repeatable results. Now, I don't want that to be the end of this process. As I touched on earlier, I do have this device to keep, so I can do follow-up videos on it, and I would love to hear your thoughts on what you would like to see covered from here. So please don't be shy. Put all of your feedback in the comments section down below. I will personally reply to each and every comment there, and if there's enough interest and demand for some follow-up videos on particular aspects of this device, you can rest assured that I will make a video to suit what you guys want out there. All right, other than that, I will leave you with it, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you are a local to Brisbane, please do come on down to the Reeftopia grand opening. It is opening today. I will be there in person. I'll be getting plenty of footage to share with all of you out there who cannot make it, but there's going to be heaps of giveaways, heaps of incredible corals, and lots of people there, all having a fantastic time, which I don't know about you, I love social events around the reefing scene, so I cannot wait to be there. I look forward to seeing you a little bit later on today, guys. But I guess there's nothing more to say other than till next time, stay safe, keep reefing. Cheers, guys. Bye.